Organ 1, vein. Organ 2, vein. Inferior vena cava, heart. Passes through 2 organs to get back to the heart. And there's a reason, is because there's signaling that goes on at organ 1 to tell organ 2 what to do. And there are only 2 portal systems in the body. Here's one, hypothalamus pituitary, which I'm an expert in. As a neuroendocrinologist, right? And the other is pancreas liver. The pancreas is telling the liver what to do. And when the liver is not doing what it's supposed to, the pancreas has to work harder to tell the liver what to do. So when you get liver fat, and it turns out 45% of Americans now have liver fat when they never had it before. When you get liver fat, your liver is not working right. When your liver is not working right, that's going to raise insulin levels all over the body, because the pancreas has to tell the liver what to do. It has to make more insulin to make the liver do the right thing. Well, that extra insulin all over the body is what's going to cause all of the chronic metabolic diseases that we know. Because insulin is not just the diabetes hormone, it's not just lowering blood glucose, it's also causing cell proliferation in places it shouldn't, like your coronary arteries, or in your breast tissue, or in your prostate, or in your brain. Okay? And so, in fact, high insulin levels have been associated with virtually all chronic diseases and cancer and dementia. So insulin is good when it lowers your blood glucose and you're diabetic, and is bad for everything else. Insulin is a good news, bad news deal. And so you want your insulin to be as low as possible and still do the job. Well, the way to get your insulin to be as low as possible and still do the job is to have a liver that works. And if your liver doesn't work, you're screwed. So what makes your liver not work? fat in the liver. That liver fat is the baddest guy in all of medicine. All right. And the question is, how did that fat accumulate in the liver to cause this problem? Answer: sugar. And how does that manifest in the lipid profile? With small, dense LDL. And where do you find that? You find that in your triglyceride to HDL ratio, even though the triglyceride to HDL ratio isn't even measuring LDL. So this is why this is so complicated. Because, in fact, to determine what your LDL is, you have to look at the other species. And most doctors don't understand this.
Oh my gosh. This is so good. That was beautiful description of the pathways in the liver, and I have so many follow-up questions I want to ask. I think the first question I have is, another way to measure insulin sensitivity is to look at basically a ratio of fasting insulin to our glucose levels, and to kind of generate you can literally go on the computer and search for this for MD Calc, for HOMA IR, which is a way of testing our insulin sensitivity by doing a ratio of fasting insulin to glucose. And that's one way to kind of look at insulin sensitivity. And you're saying that another good way to look at insulin sensitivity is to look at our triglyceride to HDL ratio, or you could directly measure small density LDL in an advanced lipid testing test, which most doctors don't offer. But really, the triglyceride HDL.
The reason they don't offer is because insurance companies don't pay for it. They would offer it if insurance companies paid for it, but it's about $500, and the insurance companies don't want to spend $500 on every, patient in America, because they would go broke.
But I think a really hopeful thing that people can take away from this conversation is that, if your doctor's not willing to order that, that's okay. You can look at your triglyceride HDL ratio and get a sense of what your small density LDL is. But how does, if triglyceride to HDL ratio is sort of a proxy of insulin sensitivity, how does that relate to fasting insulin and glucose and doing a formal HOMA-IR, which is kind of like our way we look at insulin sensitivity in the research.
Right. I always drew HOMA-IR. I always drew fasting insulin, fasting glucose in my clinic on all of our obese patients to try to figure out, are they sick with their obesity or are they not sick with their obesity? Are they metabolically healthy obese? Or do I actually have to worry about metabolic syndrome? In order to do that, you need a fasting glucose. Well, that one's easy. Everyone does that now. And you need a fasting insulin. So you have to draw a fasting insulin. Is a fasting insulin on your standard chem panel? No. Your doctor has to draw it. It has to be drawn separately. Now, here's the problem. The American Diabetes Association, by the way, they're the ones who don't know the difference between small, dense, and large buoyant LDL. The American Diabetes Association specifically tells doctors, don't draw fasting insulin. Don't draw fasting insulin.
Which feels to me like probably one of the worst decisions ever made by like a governing body in medicine, given where we're at right now with chronic disease. Yeah.
Without doubt. So the question is, why would they do that? Why would they say, don't draw a fasting insulin? There are two reasons, and they're both garbage. They're both total trash. They're both complete bunk. They're both, by the way, what they say is true, but it's like true and unrelated. They have nothing to do with the problem. All right? So I'll tell you what they say, and I'll tell you why what they say is true and why we don't care. Okay? Why they're just completely off base. You know, and so we need to basically not listen to them. All right. Reason number one. Insulin levels across the country are not standardized. That's true. So what? All right. Now, it is true that if your insulin assays are not standardized, that makes it very hard to conglomerate information, you know, from all different providers and make head or tails of it in terms of universal policy. So they're correct on that. So what? Is what I say. All right. Here's the problem. The insulin assay, a cheap insulin assay, I should say. There are expensive insulin assays, there are cheap insulin assays. Cheap insulin assays will pick up another species, not just insulin. It will pick up something called proinsulin. Proinsulin is the precursor molecule to insulin. And cheap assays will not be able to distinguish the precursor from the product. Now, in order for proinsulin to become insulin, the beta cell in the pancreas has to cleave a piece of peptide called C-peptide out of the proinsulin molecule to make the mature insulin. And the mature insulin has about 20 times more insulin lowering capacity than the proinsulin. So the proinsulin is a precursor hormone. It's not very potent. The insulin molecule is the product hormone. It is very potent. So when your pancreas is stressed, when you are sick, when you are that insulin resistant, your pancreas is trying to put out insulin as fast as it can to try to lower the blood glucose. And so sometimes it doesn't have time to wait for that enzyme called prohormone convertase 1, PC1, to be able to cleave that C-peptide out. And so it's basically trying to just dump everything it's got into the bloodstream to get to the liver, to make the liver do its job. And so what it's doing is it's dumping less effective hormone because it's dumping proinsulin. True. That proinsulin will get measured in the insulin assay. And so it will factitiously raise the serum insulin level. And so the American Diabetes Association is saying, well, we don't want to measure that. Well, that's true. We don't. But, so what? Because if it's high, that's telling you something. That's telling you got a problem. Irrespective of whether it's insulin or proinsulin, it's a problem. And the patient needs to know that. So, yes, you should still measure fasting insulin, even if it's a cheap assay, and even if it picks up proinsulin instead. So what?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first problem with the ADA. Now, the second problem. The second reason why they say don't draw fasting insulin. Insulin levels do not correlate with obesity. That's true. They don't. Insulin levels don't correlate with obesity. And the reason is because we have metabolically healthy obese people, and we have unhealthy metabolically obese people, right? And it turns out the fasting insulin in the healthy metabolically obese people will be low. And the fasting insulin in the unhealthy metabolically obese people will be high. All right? But insulin doesn't correlate with obesity. That's right. It correlates with metabolic health. Because there are plenty of, fat healthy people. And they need to know that they're fat and healthy. And there are plenty of thin, sick people. And they need to know they're thin and sick. And the fasting insulin's a way to tell. So who cares that fasting insulin does not correlate with obesity? It correlates with metabolic health, which is actually more important. So the reason they say not to do it is exactly the reason you should do it. So in both instances, in both cases, what the American Diabetes Association says to do is based on an incorrect assessment of what it is they're trying to fix. And so I have been railing against this for the last 15 years. I am doing my best, but it is tough.
Well, we are trying to do our part by offering fasting insulin as part of the Levels Metabolic Health Panel so that people can actually have access to it. But in your practice, what are you looking to shoot for a fasting insulin level?
Well, the lower the better.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can't be zero.
Right.
Because if it's zero, then you have